Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many of you out this morning for this event. We really appreciate your participation here. My name is John Koontz. I'm the facilitator for the Caregiver Support Group here at First United Methodist Church. At this time, I'd like to introduce Brenda Weidman, who is a member of our ministerial team, and she's going to bring you greetings on behalf of our church. Brenda?
Good morning to all of you. As John said, I'm Brenda Weidman, one of the ministers here at First United Methodist Church of Bella Vista, and I'm not doing a very good job with this mic, am I? Is that a little bit better? Forgive me if you didn't hear me. We welcome you on behalf of the church pastors, the church staff, and the congregation here. We're delighted that we can host this. And we know that you are all going to benefit from it. We are thankful to the Alzheimer's Association for putting this on. We all need to communicate better, but we all have loved ones with special communication needs, and knowing how to do that is extremely important. There is water and iced tea and soon to be coffee in the back. There are handouts that the Alzheimer's Association has left. Be sure to get some of that as you need it. Otherwise, we welcome you, and I'm going to turn it over to John or to whomever.
Whoever's willing to grab it, and step up to the plate. Well, as we gather here this morning, we are thankful for this educational event and the opportunity that it provides for not only learning, but some good fellowship as well. This time, I'm pleased to introduce Tina Hunter, who is the Director of Programs for the Arkansas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Tina?
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here and for John to invite us here and to have this wonderful fellowship today. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We do have sign-in sheets for you and surveys for each of the presentations today, and as you leave you can just put those in the back. And then this presentation will take about an hour, then we'll break for lunch and bathrooms and all of that. So today we've got a program that's called Effective Communication Strategies. It's something that we all can do better at for the most part, but especially when you have someone who has some communication issues around dementia or Alzheimer's disease, or something like that. As we get older, things kind of change for us. So today what we're going to do is think about those communication challenges that are going to take place during the course of Alzheimer's disease. And we're going to decode some of those verbal messages that may happen in ways that you can be helpful with someone with dementia. And then we're going to really identify some strategies where we can connect. And that's one of the most important parts, because we do want to connect with people and let them know that we're here for them, because we are all, we're all people that like to help others, or you wouldn't be here this morning, right? So what is communication? Well, communication is not only what we say, but our facial expressions when we say it, even though sometimes our facial expressions do not necessarily match our words. It's also the interactions that we have, the nonverbal pieces. How do we approach someone? How do we create those relationships? How are we receiving those messages? In the age that we have text messaging and emails and all of that, a lot of times we don't have that direct contact with people on a regular basis, so sometimes we don't exactly know what they're saying and how they're saying it when we just can see words. But what we're really going to talk about is that tone of voice, nonverbal things that you can do to communicate, and how you can embrace where they are throughout the course of the disease. So in the early stages, people are going to be able to convey messages to you. They're still able to be a part of that conversation verbally and really make decisions for themselves and their future. As we get to the middle stages of the disease and more of the advanced stages, you're going to find that people are having problems finding that right word. It just doesn't come as easy. They may use basic words and sentences. They may rely more on tone of voice or nonverbal communication and body language to express what they're trying to say. And then in the later stages, they may use very basic, very familiar words, sometimes the no's, the yeses, and those types of things. They may use music through humming or singing to communicate. And we'll talk about all of these things as we go through this program. So in the early stages, one of the ways that you may have some communication issues is that you're trying to find that right word. It's there, it's on the tip of your tongue. But as we get older, we have that too. But when you have Alzheimer's or dementia, it may not come to us. It may be on the tip of our tongues, but it's just not there. You just can't grab it. And then it may take longer for someone to respond. So you may ask them a question, hey, what would you like to do this weekend? Okay. They're having to think about, okay, this weekend, okay. And process what you've asked them. So it may take a little bit longer. And so because of that, not being able to find the right words, and because of taking longer to process what's being asked of them and to follow the conversations, they may actually withdraw from conversations and stop coming around in social situations as much. And they may struggle with some decision-making and problem-solving. When we think about, decisions that we have to make in life, they may have more difficulty balancing a checkbook or really thinking about, okay, well, if I do this, those consequences, because a lot of times our brain is affected in ways where we don't have that reasoning capacity with Alzheimer's. So we're going to hear from Martha. She is a social worker at the association. She's going to talk about communicating in those early stages.
Communicating in the early stages of dementia with the person with the disease is important. At that time, you still have language as a tool, so you can learn things about what they might prefer as the disease progresses. For example, as the disease progresses, a person might have difficulty finding words. Caregivers often struggle to know what to do in that moment. Early on in the disease, you can ask. You can say, if you ever have trouble coming up with a word, would you rather that I jump in and give you the word, or do you want me to wait and allow you some time so you can find it on your own?
And that's important because we want to make sure that we're giving the person with the disease that autonomy to make those decisions. Because a lot of times, especially if it's a relationship that we've been very close to, a spouse, or a sibling, gosh, sometimes we even, finish their sentences for them when there wasn't anything going on. And that could be one of those things that is that push button point. And it just frustrates the heck out of them because you do it. And knowing that we've got all of this baggage that we have with our relationships anyway, putting, Alzheimer's or other types of dementia on top of all of that just kind of complicates it. So being able to leave plenty of time for conversations is going to be important, especially in that early stage. And knowing that you need to be very straightforward. Saying, hey, are you excited about going this weekend? When you were younger, okay, well, sure, absolutely. I'm excited about, and you probably would have remembered. But as you get older, and as you have earlier stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, you're like, this weekend, what's weekend? What the heck are you trying to say to me? So when you are talking to someone, you want to give some clarifying, some clarifiers on it. Are you excited to go to our grandkids' house this weekend for the cookout? on Saturday. So you're giving a lot more specific information so that you're giving them clues of where we're going, how we're going, and it can be a very natural way of doing that. And then you want to make sure, I mean, how frustrating is it for us to find that someone's talking about us and making decisions about us and we're not included? Now, it can be even more frustrating, and the way I like to think about it is that as someone has Alzheimer's or dementia, when you have those, you've taken some cold medicine and you kind of have those fuzzy moments where you have that little bit of out-of-body kind of experience and things are happening around you, when you've got that real bad cold. Those are the types of things that they feel, like things are going on around them and people are making plans and making decisions without their input. So that's one of the things that we need to be mindful of. But that's one of the best ways that I can think about describing it. It's like you're not really there, but you're there. And you can't really jump in as quickly as you could before. So some signs that you may notice in someone who's starting to have some of these issues in the early stages. Easily losing train of thought. Speaking less frequently. Asking the same information over and over again. Increasing difficulty finding those right words and being able to trace their steps of what word they were actually looking for. So a lot of times you may have someone use a different word for a common object. Like instead of saying a suitcase, maybe when they were younger, they had trunks that they put their things in when they were traveling. So they may call it a trunk instead of a suitcase or a piece of luggage. Or they may just sit there and look at it and go, it's that thing that we take with us when we go places, and I put stuff in it, and they may even make up some word for it as well. So Beverly she's a facilitator for a support group, much like John is, and she's going to talk about how those spouse relationships are affected with communication. Whoops. Maybe. Here we go.
I would advise couples, and I usually do advise the caregiver who comes to the group and is caring for a spouse, that you take your time. Always count to 3 before you respond, because it gives you time to think about your answer and what's going on. Generally, in a marital dispute, it's quick. It's back and forth. You're quick to give an answer. When they've been diagnosed, to sit back and say, okay, you're supposed to be the one that's reasonable here. Let's change how we do this, because there's only one thing you can control, and that's you. You cannot control them and their process.
Right, and that's one of the things that we get real frustrated about. My aunt and uncle are going through this journey, and that's one of the reasons that I came to the Alzheimer's Association. My uncle was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, which is a precursor to Alzheimer's disease, about 1.5 years ago. And one of the things that has been really frustrating for my aunt is the repetitive conversations. So she's withdrawn from a lot of the activities that they used to do on a regular basis. And just for an example, they were at my home, probably about a month ago, and he was asking me questions, we were just having a conversation. He asked me the same question probably at least 10, 15 times. And I could see her stress level escalating. It doesn't matter how much we know. Okay, right, it's a new question. She's handling this fine. Let me just trust her and trust that process. We get frustrated because of our own baggage and our own self-awareness that, oh crap, he's going through this again. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that she's doing this. So we're doing our own self-talk that increases the frustration in that particular interaction, which can be hard. And a lot of things that we're going to talk about today is that how do you change that paradigm? It's not easy, but how do you change it just a little bit to have some successes? So as we think about, okay, we've talked about the early stages of the disease. So when we get to the middle stages of the disease, it's a little bit more intense. You've got more issues that are going on. And a lot of times this is where we actually see people get diagnosed because, oh my gosh, there is really something going on, because it's more and more noticeable. And it's going to be a little bit harder because some of that language has now, and decision-making has now dropped off considerably, and they're not able to do this. They're not able to drive at this point, for sure. And when someone has Alzheimer's, one of the things that happens is that their peripheral vision starts closing in a little bit, and a little bit more, and a little bit more as the disease progresses. And it's very important, especially in that middle stage, is to start approaching people from the front. Because if you're approaching someone over here and they can't see you, you're probably going to shock them. One of the ways that I like to show people this, if you put your goggles on. So everyone put your goggles on. Can you see the person next to you? Can you see your feet? All right. And so when you're like this in the middle stages, and let's say you're helping your loved one, okay, all right, we're gonna go out to the car because we need to get ready so that we can go to the doctor's appointment. Okay? All right, so we're walking. All right, now you need to watch where you're going, okay? And so, again, they're looking at their feet because they're watching where they're going. And when we think about watching where we're going, where do we look? Straight ahead. Yeah, we stand up straight. So then we say, okay, no, you need to stand up straight. So you have completely confused this whole situation. And they're going to think that you are correcting them, you're trying to argue with them, and so their frustration level goes up. So you've got two frustrated people. So what's the outcome there? So it's important to kind of check and put yourself a little bit in their shoes, a little bit more. So we're going to hear from Rebecca. Her mother has Alzheimer's disease, and she's going to talk about that repetitive questioning.
She could sense my frustration because occasionally I would lose my patience and I would bark at her. Why are you asking me that question again? I just answered that question 2 minutes ago. And then she would get frustrated because, she was very old school, and she's like, don't disrespect me, and I didn't ask you that question 2 minutes ago. It's a new question. So phase 2 of our relationship was like, okay, that's a new question. I'll answer it again.
But again, it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Because I continue, for my aunt's experience, I continue to tell her, it's a new question. You've got to be able to change your responses to him asking you the same questions and do something else to maybe divert it, or even, thinking about what else might be going on there. And, maybe just provide a brief answer. One of the things that she's ended up doing for one of his behaviors is that at 4 o'clock every day, if they are at home, he goes through the same story. It didn't matter what was going on, he would start into the same story if they were at home. So she exhausted all of her friends coming over at 4 pretty quick. So after I started here, I was like, well, goodness, there should be something that I can do to help her think about that behavior. And so I just put it out to her. I'm like, what would happen if you weren't at home? She's like, well, he doesn't go through it. I'm like, well, there you go. And so what she's doing now is about 3:30, they go to the library or go and walk outside if it's a beautiful day. And they do different things like that so that he has something else to do, so that that frustration for her has gone down. So we need to think about how we are responding and let the person know that we're hearing them. And that can be, just something small. I hear you. I hear that you're needing some bonding time, possibly with, going through that same story every afternoon. So let's bond in a different way. Let's go somewhere and do something together. So you want to respond in a way that's compassionate and probably brief, but respond to the emotions of what that person might need. And we're going to talk about quite a bit of that this afternoon. So in the middle stages, to connect, really keep it slow and very specific. Have those specific anchors when you're giving information or answering questions or asking questions, so that when they're responding, they can go, oh, we're going to the kids' house this weekend. Okay. We're going to leave on Friday. Or we're going over and playing golf this afternoon. Those types of things. So you have some sort of clear expectations there. And then in the middle stages, it's okay to offer to guess words, especially if they're struggling with it and it's just not coming. And it's also important to think about what are the distractions in the room, because that can also cause a problem with communicating, because if there's all of these shiny things around, this little thing going on over here, this little thing going on over here, it's hard. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I supposed to focus? So communication in the middle stages, you want to connect, give clues. It may be a visual clue or a verbal cue, or it might be a gesture. You don't want to have sudden movement all around. So having, the grandkids around that are all kinds of crazy, that may wear them out a lot. And it may be very overstimulating. You want to write things down for the person. Maybe have many different Post-it notes around with clarifying information. Repeat things as needed. And then put your answers into that question that you might be asking them. So you're giving them that information. Now, anyone who's ever had a teenager will know about this next thing, about the quizzing part. As parents, we go through and, okay, where are you going? Who are you going with? When, and go through this whole quiz when they're getting ready to leave. And how frustrating is it for your teenager? Huge. I have a 16-year-old in my life, and whew, goodness. Bless him. Bless us all for that one. He's going to maybe be driving soon, so he doesn't live up here, so you guys are safe. So, when we're quizzing folks, they get defensive, and that's your automatic response. And that's going to be the same with someone with Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia. So, also, you want to respond with empathy. It's joining that person's reality. I understand that, remembering words is going to be a little bit hard for you, and just be there for them. Focus on what's going on in that moment and the memories that you can make in that particular moment and those feelings that you can connect to, rather than the fact that it's 2015 and it's June. They may be very happy in their own world where it's 1960 and they're on the beach having a great time in September. It's okay. We don't need to correct them. Let them be there. Will it hurt anything? Not really. You want to be able to validate what they're saying and what they're feeling, and then redirect them when it's necessary. Because when they're starting to get agitated, a way to, bring the puppy in, let them play with the puppy. That's a way to redirect. Or have them call another family member. Push it off there, redirect it. And because the energy will be different with different people or different things. Now, as we move into the late stages of the disease, communication is going to be very reduced. As Alzheimer's is affecting your brain, we've got our logic areas up here in the front, and then over on the temporal lobes, this is where we have language. And the language is learned language, and it goes down to where the language that you've heard as a child. So it just has layers and layers and layers and layers, like an onion. And first you've got this lobe that's really taking your filter away. So they may say things that you've never heard them say before. Sometimes it might be colorful things. Sometimes it may be colorful things in very inappropriate places to say them. And so because that filter has gone away. And then, they may have been a very intelligent, very literate, very articulate person, but as they're progressing, the words are going away. So it may be things like, no, yes, or it may just end up being hand movements. And this is where you're really going to need to connect more from a five senses perspective. And we're going to talk about that. But we do want you to keep talking, because it's not like they can't hear you. All of a sudden they're deaf. Since they can't speak and show you words, it's not like all of a sudden their hearing went away. And a lot of times when someone can't talk, what do we respond to? We end up talking louder. And that's not necessarily the case. Their hearing may be perfectly fine. They just can't tell you anything. So think about what their expressions are telling you. Are they in pain? Is there something else going on? Do they want to go somewhere? Is there something where they're not feeling happy or heard? Or are they just not feeling safe right now? That all can happen. And you want to continue to bring respect into that conversation. Sandra, her mother is in the late stages of the disease, and she's going to talk about how she has bonded with her mom as she's going through this. Oh, I hit too many times.
I know that my mom feels aggravated. I know that she feels alone. I know that she feels confused. And I know on any given day, I don't know if I've made it better for her. I try. In these later stages, I've come to recognize that being really aware of the five senses is really important. Touch seems to give her a great deal of comfort. I know when I come over, I'm going to brush her hair all the time. My husband noted to me recently, he said, you should see the look on your mom's face when you're brushing her hair. She's just happy. She's just happy. She doesn't say a lot. And I do it for a long period of time. I comb it, I braid it, I do funny things with it, but it just allows me to just be with her in a way that makes her feel comfortable.
So communicating through touch. Feeling different fabrics, maybe having some different kind of quilt that has all different kinds of textures on it could be a way that you could connect. Hand massages. And one of the things about hand massages is that it can be a very bonding experience, and it can be very relaxing for someone. So if you take your hand, and you can even do this when you're hand washing and do it to yourself, rubbing through your palm and having just a nice direct pressure can be very relaxing. And then making sure that you get the top of the hand as well, and the fingers, and then maybe having a little squeeze at the end, so that you are actually helping with circulation and relaxation through that hand massage. You can also have lotions there, and you can connect through smell if the person can have scented lotion. You may want to have a bag that has everyday items in it, like some cotton balls and maybe some dish rags in there, especially if they are a female, because things that they have used regularly in their life, folding laundry is something that I know I do on a regular basis. So it may be something that could be very repetitive and a way to connect, and so that the person is feeling useful. Visiting with animals can be a very important piece if they're not allergic, and it's okay, because there's something special when you have a dog or a cat coming up to you, depending on what your preferences are, and just getting to cuddle with them and play with them. That's just a fun thing to do, and it's just so relaxing for many different people, but especially someone who has Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. It may be that you could bring some Play-Doh, and they can use that to move their hands around and have something pliable. Connecting through sight. Laminating pictures of things that they may have been exposed to throughout their life. And you probably want to laminate them, because there may be some times where things get a little messy and you want to keep them together. And that you can look through them together. Maybe it would be pictures of places that they've been, family members, different things like that. And they might even have different responses to different things that they see. Watching videos of nature or animals, that can be very relaxing. Looking at photo albums together, because we all have, things that we might really connect to that may have happened a long time ago. I know I always like looking at photo albums that have my grandparents when they were first getting married. They actually took some pictures. Gosh, it was very early, and I don't even know how they got the pictures taken, but they were posing by a car, and they didn't have a car. So there's no telling how all of that went together, but there's one of my favorite pictures. I have it framed in my house of them the day that they were going to get married. So bird watching can be a very relaxing thing, especially for someone who is a nature type of person. I know that a lot of different facilities and churches have areas where they've got bird feeders out and things like that, because it is a relaxing pastoral type of thing. Visiting an aquarium, if the person, if you've got access to that, how relaxing is it to go and sit and watch the fish? A lot of doctors' offices have aquariums too, because it is a relaxing thing. Painting with watercolors, it can be something that they can do with their hands or with brushes, depending on what they are comfortable with, and create something that means something to them personally. Even just going outside for a few minutes, especially if they've been cooped up for a while inside. I know that I get cabin fever when in the winter, when we've got a little bit of snow outside. I'm like, okay, we got to go outside. We got to do something. So just because you get older and you have Alzheimer's or other types of dementia doesn't mean that you still don't do those types of things. especially if they've been an outdoors person. Maybe they were a gardener when they were younger. Connecting through sound. There's been a lot of research around connecting through sound, and people that have had very late stages of dementia responding to music. So this is a really exciting thing that we can introduce to people, whether it is hymns that they are very used to, or whether it is, big band music or music from the 50s, different things like that that they can really bond and relate to. It may be very relaxing to listen to nature sounds. A lot of people find that super relaxing, and they can bond with it, especially maybe they grew up on a farm and you have farm sounds that you can play. So that connects for that person. It may be that they identify with different musical instruments. They might have played the drums when they were younger or played the trumpet. And so they might really bond with that as well. They want to hear your voice, especially voices that are very familiar to them and very comforting. So that is also a way to bond. There is one piece that in a support group that I had visited, one of the ladies was talking about her mom. And her mother, she was in a facility, and she would go and visit her every day. And her mother would hum every day. It would be different hymns because she was in the choir at her church when she was younger. So she would just hum different hymns. One day when she came in to visit her mom, she was humming Battle Hymn of the Republic very, very hard and very distinctly. She's like, there's something going on here. What's up? She's like, I think I probably need to take Mom to the doctor and have her looked at. She ended up having an infection, and she wouldn't have known otherwise without her mom giving her those clues and her being in tune with the types of hymns that she would sing on a regular basis or hum on a regular basis. So that was, just something very gentle and subtle for most of us, but it was a huge deal for her because that's one of the things that they connected on and bonded on. They would hum together. So, connecting in the late stage through smell. Gosh, don't we all love some particular types of food? And gosh, if we smell a fresh baked apple pie in the oven, that just makes you think of Thanksgiving or Christmas. So it brings back really good, fabulous memories. And it's a way that you can bond with someone who has Alzheimer's or dementia, is through that smell, that good smell, that comforting smell. And, it might not be that they were too big on the apple pie piece. It may be that coffee, smelling some coffee beans really is comforting to them, because maybe when they were younger, they would sit out on the porch and drink a cup of coffee before they started their day. And that was their way of just having some time. It may be flowers, especially for someone who was a gardener and would have things in their garden. So different types of things, and knowing the person is very helpful in that connecting piece of it. Through connecting through taste. As someone goes through Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, there are things that within their taste buds that change because of the ways that the brain is changing. So you may find a person that has Alzheimer's or some form of dementia really likes sweet things. Wants to put chocolate pudding on everything. Or it could just be, my grandfather, and he wanted to put whipped cream and fruit salad on everything. But that was just something that he had always done. Anytime we had whipped cream and fruit salad, which my grandmother had to, kind of cut it back for special occasions because he'd just pile it on top of his pie. So things like popsicles or sodas or baked goods, those might be things that you can really communicate and bond with the person, because that sweet texture on their tongue does actually communicate with them. Sometimes it is more of the salty taste that will resonate with them in later stages of Alzheimer's. But for the majority of the time, through the research that I've looked at, it's that sweet that really gets people. So as we think about, communicating throughout this whole journey of Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia, we really want to be able to connect to the person on their level, in their reality, wherever that reality might be. And it might be in different places at different times of the day. And that's okay. Just go there and understand, our own self-awareness, because we're really quick to correct something or try to change, where that reality goes and try to guide it to someplace else. But just be there and be present is one of the most important parts of this whole process of this disease. It's a horrible disease, and it's hard to understand and accept what you can't change. But that's something that will take time and lots of practice. There are going to be times when you don't get it right, and that's okay. Learn and move on to something else. We want to remember that the person is still that person, even though they're not the same. There are going to be differences that are going on, and truly deep down they just want to be who they are. But the disease is going through all of these changes, and it can't let them communicate who they are. I mean, it's hard because with cancer, we know what it is. We can cut it out. We can treat it. We can do all of those things. But with Alzheimer's, it's just a subtle change that's progressive, and you can't do a darn thing about it. It just has to go through its stages. You can help with the behaviors, absolutely. There are medications you can take. But all in all, we don't have a cure for it right now. We're working really hard to find one through the association, but gosh darn it, we don't have it yet. There will be a conference coming up next month in DC. It's an international conference for Alzheimer's research. And so I'm hopeful that some really good and exciting news will come out of that next month. Again, we want to demonstrate respect for the person as we are connecting through those feelings and through the senses, and treat them as the adult that they are. My aunt, and I know that my uncle has overheard this, she will refer to him as a 2-year-old. A lot. She did it in front of me, and I corrected her. And by goodness, that was really bad. I'm not supposed to correct my aunt. My aunt's, the all-knowing person. She's the patriarch of our family right now. I'm not supposed to correct her. But I did, and I was like, yikes. And it went okay. But, we want to make sure that we are treating them as the adult that they are, even though there are times when we think somewhere in the back of our mind, dang it, we're going through this again and we're having a temper tantrum or something like that. But just make sure that you're treating them with respect and dignity. And try to decode what they're trying to tell you. What's the root of their behavior or from their words or their tone? And recognize your mood and the mood of others that are in the room do affect the person with Alzheimer's disease. And sometimes they can change dramatically depending on different people that may be in the room or different types of moods and changes that are going on. And then try to understand the source of the reactions and help meet the person's needs in a soothing and calming way where you are truly getting to the root of what's going on. So we're going to hear from Sam. He's the Director of Special Projects for the Alzheimer's Association, and he's going to talk a little bit more about this communication piece.
Taking care of yourself while you care for somebody with the disease not only impacts your own health, but it really can impact the person with the disease. So for example, if you're not getting enough sleep, you might be easily irritated, which will then sort of spill over to your interactions with the person with the disease and maybe being short with them, which then might cause them to get frustrated. So it's not only important to take care of yourself for your own health, but really for you to really be a good caregiver.
And that goes all with communication. If we're sleepy, hungry, we get easily irritable. So, and those are carrying over to your interactions with the person that you are taking care of. And just to let you know, through our website and through the association, I have in your packets a 1-800 number. And that is a 24-hour day, 365-day a year number that you can call when you do get frustrated, when you have general questions. Where do I even begin with this? We're here for you because we know that this disease is not, okay, we can deal with this from 8 to 5. After 5 o'clock, we're done. That's not the reality. We know that this is a 24-hour day process. There are going to be times when you're up all night caregiving for the person that you love. And we want to be here for you when you're having those moments where it is just too much to have another conversation or to answer another question that you've answered 50 times before that day. And these are some other resources that we have on our website that can help you really process this in a way that is at your own pace. Through our Caregiver Center, we've got information about driving. There are some great videos about how to have those conversations to stop driving. There are role plays in there as well that come from a place of love and understanding. And so it's a really neat thing that we can offer people. The Navigator does an online assessment of how things are going and what resources do you need right now. And you can share that with other people as well. And then we have not only our in-person support groups, we have one here at the church on the second and fourth Monday of every month at 9 o'clock. And John is our fabulous facilitator for that. And he tries to bring in different speakers from time to time, but also have space for you to just talk and learn from each other. And John is a great resource for everyone in the community. But we do have online message boards for people that really feel they would like to have that anonymity and connection. And sometimes that may be better for some of the younger folks, maybe your kids or grandkids that are going through some of this. It's a way for them to connect in a different way. We have a community resource finder that can connect you with information about different physicians, elder law practices, and programs that we have coming up, different support groups that we have going on. So we try to make sure that everything is easily accessible for you in many different ways. And then all of our education programs, this one isn't on there yet, but we have many of our other education programs on our website. So if you like what you've heard today, this morning and this afternoon, you can check out other programs that we have through e-learning. Or, gosh, this would be really helpful for my sister that lives in Florida. You can have her go online and go through that e-learning process as well. So we try to make sure that we're getting the same information out regardless if you live in Bella Vista, Crossett, Arkansas, Fairbanks, Alaska, Hawaii, Florida, wherever you live. We're giving you consistent information and the support that you need as you go through this. All right, John? We can open it up for questions, and we'll see if lunch is about ready. Take a stretch break. Does anyone have any questions right now?
As we wrap up this session on communication, I've got a kind of an interesting story for you. I'll just throw it out, let you think about it, and see if you come up with an answer. In my work with dementia patients, work specifically with a lot of guys, and of course when we have these flashbacks and remember things that happened years ago in our lives, why guys typically think about their war experiences and whatnot. I was visiting with this one gentleman at a particular time, and he was talking about his experience in the war and the fact that he was a flight instructor, and he tells several different things, and then he ends it up by saying, well, yeah, when I was stationed at the air base in Enid, Oklahoma, I promise you, young man, there was not one Japanese aircraft that got past Tulsa. So, how do you respond to a deal like that? And I said, we thank you for that. But, you know, these types of things come up on a rather continual basis, and what you have to do is think of ways of downplaying it, and probably an appropriate answer for anything that comes up along that way is just simply say, hey, you know, it's interesting that you remember it that way. That way you diffuse the situation, and you go on about your way. You have validated his feelings, and you can redirect and move in another direction at that point. So anyway, sorry to take that time. That wasn't part of my speaking part, but since we've been talking about communication, I thought you might enjoy that. What I'm going to do at this point is offer a little prayer, kind of a blessing, as we get ready to eat. And then I'm going to give you instructions for what we need to do for lunch, where to sit, so forth and so on. So if you would you pray with me? Dear Lord, we ask that you will strengthen us and inspire us with your love and grace, so that as we journey onwards, we will serve others with greater compassion and understanding. Now we ask that you would bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies and us to thy service, and together we say, Amen. Okay, instructions for lunch. Lunch table will be right over here. Food will be appearing.
So that our national office knows how we're... I knew I was going to do that. Sorry. So our national office knows how we're doing here in Arkansas. We have a local office in Bentonville on North Walton. And then we also have offices in Fort Smith and in Little Rock. And I'm out of the Little Rock office, but cover the whole state. Lunch was wonderful. That pasta salad was really good. So... Yes. Yeah, we've got some. Yeah. We've got some in the back. All right, for this second part of the day, we are going to be using a workbook out of your packet, and it has a lot of the information that I'm covering, but it is the Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behavior book, and it has the color information on it. And part of what we're going to do this afternoon is actually talk about how to respond to dementia-related behaviors, and you guys are going to be doing some work. this afternoon and thinking about what are some strategies you could use to respond to that behavior. So I'm going to give you some tools at the first part, and then the second half of the presentation, you will be answering some of these questions with the vignettes and utilizing, your neighbors. So I think you'll get a lot out of this next presentation. So what are we going to do for this particular presentation? We are going to identify some triggers and why are these behaviors happening? And we're going to look at 4 very common behaviors around dementia and Alzheimer's. We're also going to explain the process for assessing and identifying these challenging behaviors and list some strategies that are common for addressing these behaviors. So some of the most difficult behaviors that people do have that really challenge caregivers and people that are loved ones of the person that has Alzheimer's or dementia is pain and discomfort or overstimulation and boredom. These are like the root causes. When we are frustrated, we act out. When we are scared, it's not something that we're very comfortable with. Completing tasks may become frustrating, especially if they're complicated and they have lots of steps to them. And maybe you've done this a billion times. You've made this particular recipe and it just doesn't come out right, or you can't, I was making some pudding with using my grandmother's recipe. I know it backwards and forwards. And I was doing it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this doesn't taste right. And it's not thickening up. I left out all of the flour. And that's what you've got to have to thicken it up, especially when you've got a custard base. And so when you have Alzheimer's and dementia, like we were talking about earlier with the communication strategies, you can't retrace what actually you did or didn't do. As we, get older, of course, we may forget this, that, or the other thing, or just being human. It happens. Sometimes things just don't come out right. But, so we're just going to really think about, from the perspective of the person with Alzheimer's or dementia, what's going on and why is it going on? So there's basically 4 ways of understanding and addressing the behaviors. And these are the things that we're going to talk about today. Detecting and connecting, addressing physical needs first, addressing the emotional needs, and then reassessing and making a plan for next time this comes up, because it will. Sometimes more often and more frequently than you would want it to. But it does. So as we kind of get started, how do you really connect with that person? Yes, through communication, and that's very important. But again, remembering to join them in their reality. Being there in that moment, wherever that moment may lead you. You may not be in Bella Vista. That moment, you may be sitting on the beach in Florida, having beautiful, fabulous drinks. And that's okay. That's a wonderful place to be. My aunt and uncle are there right now. So really understand and join that and just be a part of it, experience it, and just really immerse yourself in whatever that reality happens to be and where it takes you. Then, before intervening, just kind of think about, okay, where are they? Who might they think they're with? Because they may not recognize me. I'm her daughter, but she may not recognize me as a 43-year-old female. She may remember me as a kindergartner. So technically, I may not look and act like, from her perspective, her daughter. And we have to be okay with that. And then think about where they are. what's going on, what's happening around the activity that they're doing, and how is all of this coming together? And then approach the person calmly and respectfully. And just, again, one of the things that we were talking about during lunch at my table is that, gosh, there's just times when you just have to laugh. There are going to be times when you're trying to connect in using these tools where it's like, this is absolutely absurd. And you just kind of have to laugh, but go with it. And, just think about it. When we were kids, how much imaginary play did we do? Especially if you were an only kid. I had all kinds of imaginary stuff going on everywhere. I had friends and all kinds of stuff as an only child. So just think about, that role playing and going into that space with them. Addressing the physical needs first. As I spoke about earlier, is the person in pain? Are they trying to give you a verbal cue, like through Battle Hymn of the Republic very angrily? Are they trying to give you that clue that there is something going on? And it may be something as easy as they're thirsty or they're hungry. Because a lot of times, as we get older, because we have changes in our bladders, and sometimes we have more urgency to go to the bathroom, we don't drink as much. Or, especially if you know that you're going to go on a trip or you're going somewhere, you might not, you may be more thirsty than you would be if you were normally at home. So, but just generally, sometimes, and even we forget to drink stuff as well. And so we ignore our thirst. It could be that they're just really lonely and they haven't had any social interaction that they can recall. They may have had a whole house full of people just yesterday, but that was that moment. What's going on in this moment? And there may be some other environmental cues. What if they're cold? What if they're hot? And that's causing discomfort, because we know that lots of rooms can be pretty cold, especially when you're going to church or going into a doctor's office, or sometimes even different offices that you go to. And then especially when you've got 90 plus degree weather outside and then you go into a building, there can be some discomfort there as well. So we're going to hear from Sam again. He's going to talk to us about some of these cues. Maybe.
It's important to address the physical needs of a person with Alzheimer's, because we should really see if there's something going on that might be causing some pain or discomfort that's causing the person to act a certain way. Like, for example, it could be as simple as maybe the person's shoe is on wrong and it's causing pain in their foot, and by adjusting the shoe would sort of get rid of that frustration, make them walk better. Or it could be something more serious like a urinary tract infection that's causing some problems. So it's important to check that out, whether it be something you could do yourself or something that you should go see a doctor about.
And also it may be that they have, ill-fitting dentures. Or, if they are living in a community environment, they may have someone else's dentures or someone else's shoes or shoes on the wrong feet. And, the whole point of dressing and getting someone ready for the day can be very challenging, especially as they're doing it themselves, because we want them to have that independence. So as we, continue, just kind of think about those things. And, we also want to address those emotional needs. Focus again on feelings that they may have rather than facts. I know it's quite easy to say, okay, but that's not true. That it is not, 1985. It's just not. And please stop saying that it is. It's very, very easy to get, caught up in, okay, especially those of us who have very sequencing types of brains and really focus on being technically correct at all times, and maybe even having the history. Well, mom was always technically correct throughout her lifetime. Or gosh, dad was an engineer. And everything was very much to the point. But it's different now. We have a different reality. Those things may still be there from time to time, but it's not where we are always. So use that general knowledge and that history that you have with the person to provide really appropriate types of feedback and interventions that are going to be more about who they are and where their feelings are in this particular moment than, those facts and that absoluteness and that black and white area that sometimes we go to, especially when we start getting very stressed out. And us as caregivers, this is stressful. And even though we have very well-meaning types of responses, sometimes we don't get it right. And, that's when we're going to talk about how to, plan and reassess and kind of debrief yourself. So Rose is going to talk about her mother with Alzheimer's disease and how she went from that fact part to that feelings part.
She was part of the family. She'd fold towels, and she'd fold towels all day long some days. Just, put them back in the basket, and then she'd give them to her, here's some more towels. And it may sound like it's cruel, but look, it kept her busy. It kept her movements going. It kept her, just kept her occupied, and it made her feel wanted and that she was contributing. We created a routine for her that worked for her around her agitation and, her sleep patterns. So every day she was in the same routine for the most part. And every day she did something. She was always in the kitchen every day helping do something. Sometimes she'd rinse dishes. But she was always near the kitchen sink because she spent most of her life in front of the kitchen sink. Now she was just doing it in different ways. And, going for a walk, going out in the car for a drive, walking around the yard, watering plants. Those are all things that she did, and we just had her continue doing them.
Right, because the person wants to feel needed, just as we all do. And we want to feel that we can contribute. And so finding different ways to have the person feel like they can contribute and be beneficial and do things that they're used to doing is going to help with that emotional connection that we have to feel needed and wanted. The final step is asking yourself whether or not the new response helped. Did this work? Did this not work? What went well? What really didn't? Holy cow. Gosh. What adjustments do I need to make? Because through any type of behavior that we have and any type of response that we're given, there's always things that we could have done differently or better or, maybe just had a different response for this particular situation. We all have those kinds of things. And then as we know that these same types of behaviors are going to come back up, we can say, okay, well, next time, let me try to remember to do this, this, and this, and see if that works. Because a lot of it's going to be trial and error. We don't have a manual for this. This is the best that we can have for some steps that will help make it a little bit better and to help you tailor your responses from a place of connection and getting to the root of what's going on. So we're going to apply these behaviors, and this is the part where you guys get to do some work. So on page 25 of your workbook, we're just going to kind of walk through some of this. there is a vignette where we have some anxiety or agitation that we're going to look at. So, Alice, she's a 75-year-old woman with Alzheimer's disease. And she was pacing the hallways in her house in the evenings. And she was saying, I need to go. I need to go. As she was walking. She would not stop walking even for meals. Her family would give her sandwiches to eat while she was walking. Though she used a cane, she was getting blisters on her feet and had lost weight from not eating much from all the walking. Alice's husband, Bill, would ask her to sit down. But as soon as she sat, Alice would immediately get up from the chair and start pacing again. So what I'm going to have you do is think about that agitation and work with your neighbors to think about how you would walk through this behavior using these 4 steps and tools. And then we're going to discuss it as a group and kind of get some good, valuable information from each other. And all the steps are in here, and your vignette is in here and everything. Okay? It's on page 25.
Oh. I'm so busy talking and listening to them.
There we go.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome. Oh.
No, I had family members. Right now, I don't have anybody really like that. Everything you say is just exactly what they do. My mother-in-law walked
Mm-hmm.
100 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Tighter in the chair.
That's scary.
It is. But they all look different.
Mm-hmm. They do. It is. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
Worry about me getting it because I won't know it. I'm afraid they'll find something to help people.
Definitely. Me too.
I have a neighbor across the street that's in these stages, and I have her brother, reminding me of this. Plus, I see John every time he has a class because I work in the office.
Okay, I'm going to give you guys a couple more minutes and then we'll hear some of your responses, okay? So wrap it up in about a minute or so. All right, so I know that we're having some great conversations, and we're going to come back to these because we're going to go through several different types of behaviors that are very common. So now, as we're looking at anxiety and agitation, who wants to talk about what they came up with about detecting, which is our first step? Just calmly talking to her would be what you would say. Okay. You could walk with her as well.
Finding out where she is in her mind, if we're at the beach, if we're at school.
Finding out where she's walking and what she's doing. That's a great thing. Blisters on her feet, treating those. Another style of shoes may be helpful. And looking at the shoes, maybe she's even got her shoes on the wrong feet. And she's losing weight, so maybe some additional nutrition like a shake may be a good thing for her. Pardon? Implying meds up to her feet, putting some medication on there, absolutely. So those are the things that we can do. Yeah.
One of the things that seems to work reasonably well for people that have a tendency to pace a lot, whether they have sore feet or blisters or not, is setting up a grazing bar, which is if you have a basket of fruit or other types of food products sitting out. This particularly works well for those loved ones that may not even like to sit down to a regular scheduled meal. Just kind of set up a grazing bar, and then they can go by any time, day or night, or whenever they're hungry and pick up something and have a banana, apple, or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of things that we need to address. Is there a medical issue going on with her feet? Is there something else going on? Are the blisters healing in a way that they should be? Because, she may or may not have an elevated blood sugar, which could cause her feet not to heal as quickly. So after we've addressed that, what about addressing the emotional needs? What kind of emotional needs does she have right now? She's agitated. She's pacing. What else is going on here? What are some other emotional needs that she may be trying to communicate? She's upset and she's stressed. And so you may want to watch for her pace of walking. What else? The need to be needed. If she was a nurse, if that was where her reality was, then yeah, she wants to feel needed and feel like she can contribute and take care of things because she did for so many years. Right? You can walk with them and, talk and walk. A lot of times that can be very helpful for the person. And then, as we look at the fourth thing, really looking at how we address this. Maybe we got her some new shoes and some new socks, and that's helping, and she doesn't really have anything, so the blisters are starting to heal up again. And so we handled this pretty well. But gosh, what if it starts happening again? Are there some other underlying issues? I mean, especially if there aren't the blisters there so that we can see that. She might have what's called sundowners syndrome. Maybe she was a night nurse. And so she comes alive in the evenings. So those are all things to kind of consider as you go through looking at the different types of behaviors. So Sandra's going to talk about her mother in the late stages of the disease as well.
One of the big challenges are the personality changes that begin to manifest. And, my dad thinks sometimes my mom's being difficult or she's being very quiet and she's sitting in the room by herself. She may have done that anyway, I don't know. But I have talked to other people I know who are experiencing this, and they find that sometimes the patients exhibit very aggressive behavior, extreme agitation, fear. I think for me, fear actually makes a lot of sense, because if your brain isn't working and you don't remember things and you don't know what things are for, then how do you know the people around you will protect you from what it is you're going through?
Right, and if you can understand from the perspective that they're coming from, I mean, it can be understandable because, that place of fear, it can be a very scary place if you can't remember what you're doing and why you're supposed to be there. So it can be a very scary type of phenomenon. When you're not recognizing familiar people or places or things, it's quite easy for someone with Alzheimer's or other types of dementia to accuse others of stealing or infidelity, or even, be suspicious of somebody, coming into their house and changing things. And these are types of the suspicion, and this confusion is a very common thing that I hear a lot as a very frustrating piece for caregivers. So this is what our next behavior is going to be about. So we're going to keep Alice's situation in mind, and on page 27, there's more information about Alice. When Alice's family comes to visit and the evening begins, she becomes very suspicious that people are trying to get into her house and they're watching through the windows. And I think this can probably hit home for several people. She becomes suspicious of the family not making those people go away. And she's thinking that everybody's in cahoots with one another. So let's think about how we would handle this situation and go through those 4 steps again. Okay, let's start talking about the confusion and suspicion part of that. what is going on here? What we need to look at as we detect the roots of this suspicion and confusion. What are some things that you guys came up with? Yeah. What is the trigger? What is actually going on? Why is she suspicious? Does she recognize the people that are around her? Does she recognize her surroundings? You had it happen to you? Okay, John. She's had this happen. Yeah.
My husband carried a key around, house key around in his pocket all the time, and on one morning it wasn't there. And he was certain that someone had been in the house and taken it. And for that whole week, we looked everywhere, obviously not because we didn't find it right away, but that whole week he was just crazy. He was putting things on the door, so you, like the garage door, so you couldn't get it open, and he was checking the locks every now and then, and hiding his tools because he knew someone was in his tool shop. And I found this key in his robe pocket, and so that was like a whole week of that, and now that's gone. But it was really some week, I'll tell you.
I bet. That does sound like some week. And this can happen, and then all of a sudden, it can be a repetitive type of thing where there's continual suspicion and confusion around lost things, misplaced things, or things that they don't even recognize that are actually theirs, or things that they think that are theirs that are really not. So yeah, that I'm glad that you found it and put his mind at ease, and then it was good. Where have you put the key since? Okay, putting it around his neck, yeah.
Well, our group wondered if it would be a good idea to kind of visit with this person, this loved one, and have them tell us more about the intruder or the person that they're fearing, and just get them talking about that.
Yeah, it could have been something that happened when they were much younger. Like someone could have, broken into their home and they're remembering that. So yeah, so there may be a story behind this.
Well, what about if you just said, well, let's go outside and see who's out there?
Yeah, going outside and seeing who's there, what's going on.
Do you want to go out and see? But then if she's suspicious of her family, that might be.
It might be, it might be counterproductive, right? Because if she's suspicious of everyone, then there may be some other issues there that are going to be a little bit more stressful in kind of continuing it on.
One of the logical approaches to this is if everything's okay with the family members, one quick fix is to get her outside while another family member inside closes the drapes, and if she's sitting, move her chair in a slightly different position so she can no longer look out the window. So sometimes it's an issue of not making an adjustment with the person, but making an adjustment with the environment in which they are functioning. Kind of another quick sidebar I might throw in for what it's worth. In the mind of a dementia patient, there's a concept goes on called confabulation. And I know that sounds like a trumped up word, maybe it is, I don't know. But the reality of it is, in confabulation, if you have a caregiver in your home and your loved one sees that caregiver carry the trash out, and you, the daughter or the son, come in later and all of a sudden mom can't find her purse, guess what? Her mind is going to connect the issue of the trash being carried out with the fact that she can't find her purse, and guess what? You're the person there that's going to take the brunt of it at that particular. So oftentimes, in the mind of the dementia patient, concepts get put together to create more problems.
Right, that can happen, and it can be where all of a sudden you come in and then there's this whole big situation that's been brewing all day, and gosh, in their mind they've been going through this and getting more and more and more worked up. So then, God, when you get there, it's like, poof, here's this whole bunch of stuff that I'm just going to lay out there for you, and that puts you on you're like, what the world's going on here? So yeah, all of that can happen. So there may be some medical issues. So what about the physical needs? There may be some medication that's causing some confusion. There may be some sort of additional health issue that's kind of trumped up that particular confusion, because a lot of times people will get a urinary tract infection because they're not drinking enough water and going to the bathroom on a regular basis. And so we may want to think about, well, if this just happened all of a sudden and it's pretty explosive, let's see if there's something else going on medically with them. See if there's some medications that are interacting, or gosh, is Alice actually taking additional medication that we don't really even know about? Because there's no telling what could possibly be in, her house. So what other things did you think about with her physical needs? Yeah, is she hot or cold? Is her clothing comfortable? Is there another reason why she's getting agitated? Does she even recognize just the basic things in her home? Because that could also be an issue. So what about that? Because the biggest part with this one is that emotional side of this. Because when we are confused and suspicious and thinking that people are out to get us, that is very stressful, because that's their reality right now. So how can we really focus on her emotional needs?
If there have been houses or areas that have been broken into, an area that she's heard about.
There could have been houses in the area that have been broken into that she's heard about, because you never know what she may have heard at the beauty shop or at the grocery store or even in Sunday school.
Or imagined.
Pardon?
Or imagined.
Or think that she, read it in the paper, even though she hasn't read the paper in years. All of that stuff could happen. Absolutely.
Walk around shoulders, check make sure the door's locked, make sure the window's shaded.
Yeah, go round with her to the places that she thinks are some vulnerable parts of her home, and recheck locks, maybe put new locks in, change the locks, put new things in, maybe check the shades. As John said earlier, maybe you need to reposition her furniture in a way that is where she's not just staring at a window and the people next door or whatever it happens to be. So sometimes that change of furniture can change that perspective quite well. Yes, sir? Installing outside lights, that's a great idea, especially when you're thinking about safety. Yes, ma'am.
Is it okay if, after you've determined that there is no danger to this person, although she's imagining this, she, is it okay to say, Mom, we have checked this. There's nothing that's going to harm you. Everything is okay. We talked to the guy. Now he's in prison. I mean, I don't even know what you want to say, but is that okay to do?
There are ways that you can redirect that and say, okay, you and I have both gone through this entire house. We've changed the locks. Maybe even remind we've put an outside light out. We have, maybe even fit and say, the police officers are going to do an extra rotation around this area just to make sure things are okay and to look after you.
Is that true or not? We have trouble lying.
Well, you've got to, it is hard lying about it, but sometimes you have to just say, we've done this. It's a part of being in their reality. We've taken care of this. Let's go through our checklist again. And you may have to go through that checklist on a regular basis. It could be that once you've installed that light and she sees the light outside, she feels a little bit more safe. And if you've changed the locks and all of that, she may feel more safe. And especially as you go through that checklist. And you may have to write it down so that they'll know. But it's hard because they truly believe that this is reality. Have you seen some of this in your support group, John?
We do. Had a situation where mother-in-law, every afternoon about 3 o'clock when the kids were coming home from school, she happened to be seated by the window, and she was delusional and indicated that there were kids out messing with the mailbox. You know, they were going to destroy the mailbox. They were going to tear it down, all sorts of weird things. So the resolution to that resolved was that the man of the house or the woman of the house, whoever was home at that particular time, would just say, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to go out and get the mail, and I'm going to shoo the kids away." And the individual would go out and flail their arms and wave around like they were shouting out directions to people and go back in. And then the conversation was, "Okay, did you see me shoo those kids off? And here's the mail." So in that particular situation, that resolved that. Another situation that cropped up was the pulling of the shades, the seating that we discussed earlier did no good. The individual would still kind of have a tendency to go look out the window. But the particular individual dearly loved Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Miller orchestra-type music. So the issue was finally resolved by going in to another area of the house where the stereo player was, and about the time that these delusional experiences came about during mail delivery in the afternoon, why we would sit down and listen to music, and that would defray that and also distract from further disruption. Now, I heard the comment a moment ago about lying to our loved ones, and I know from a theological perspective that since we're in the Bible Belt, that goes against the grain. What I would tell you is that as a caregiver for dementia people, we never lie to them. What we say is, "I have become an active participant in the sharing of misinformation."
I've also heard it as a therapeutic fib as well. So, yeah, there's times when, again, we have to just join into that reality, and sometimes it is, for our own sanity, is to find something to distract or to find something that is going to calm them down. I mean, they're probably not going to remember it 10 minutes later anyway. But it's going to come up again.
So you're going to have to lie again.
Right. Or, find some place to distract, find a way to distract the behavior. And, as I shared earlier with my aunt and uncle's situation, I mean, she had to go through, his wasn't confusion or suspicion, but it was still a behavior that happened at a certain period of time during the day at a particular location. So she took him completely out of that location to kind of calm her frustration and agitation herself and her own anxiety about hearing the same stories over and over again. So that distraction piece can help greatly, because we know that if you can get someone focused on something else, they tend to start letting some of that other stuff go. If you can really get them engaged over here, then this situation over here kind of goes down a little bit and is less escalated. So, all right. And then again, as we go through all of this, what worked? What didn't work? What can we try again because we know it's going to happen again? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's resolved by just having the lanyard. So think about how we can truly be in that moment. And none of this is easy. I keep saying that, but it's not. These are emotions. A lot of times we are in some form of deep relationship with the person that we're caregiving for, whether it's a mom, sister, uncle, dad, brother, spouse, parent. We are in a deep emotional connection and bond with these people, and we only want what's best, but we also need to take care of ourselves and try to have the best outcome possible. And that's something that we don't talk about enough, is how do you take care of yourself as you're handling these behaviors? What are some tips that you give to some of the folks in the support group about really stepping back and taking care of themselves?
The first thing that we typically talk about is the statistics that are behind the need for a caregiver getting respite. And, you know, it's always a sad thing when you have to tell people that, do you realize that 40 to 50% of the caregivers have to give up what they do as a caregiver because of health issues? And in many instances, caregivers that do not seek adequate respite ultimately end up dying before the ones that they're taking care of. So,
and that's horribly sad, because you're just trying your best to get through this. And how sad is it to even face that reality that you could go first? Wow. That's heavy.
The common saying is it takes a village to raise a child, but I can tell you it takes a village to do caregiving for a dementia patient as well. And far too many people wait too late to get involved in something like adult day activity center like Village House that we have here, even if it's a matter of getting a friend to come into the home. People really need to get a hold of the situation and do that early on, because as the disease progresses, it becomes more and more difficult to relinquish those care activities. We all like to think we're superhuman and we can do it all ourselves, but we certainly cannot.
We got it right here.
Well, I was just going to talk about the Village House, and we, when my mother lived with us, she went 2 or 3 times a week. And if any of you have do not know about the Village House, this gal right here, Tricia Ayers, she can tell you more about that. And the other thing that is really unique to this village is the courtesy van. If you don't know about that, it will. If you're a caregiver, the courtesy van is their mission is not really to take care of dementia patients or dementia clients, but they're very good to provide the transportation so that the caregiver can have some time away.
Yeah.
Both very good things that we have here in Bella Vista.
Yeah, it's a great community that can be supportive. But one thing as the caregiver, and John mentioned this, you're not superhuman. You've got all of these people in this room that you can reach out to and help, and really think about who is there for you. Who can, you know, whether it's your Sunday school class, whether it's a Bible study group, or whether it's just people that you've seen in this room today. You know, what little pieces can help, especially when it comes to some of these stronger, more frustrating types of behaviors. And how can you take that break? And the other piece of that, how can you actually realize that the behaviors are actually overwhelming to you personally, and you've had it up to here? When can you say, oh, I can't do it all? And that's a hard, hard piece to have. So as we look at other types of behaviors, we'll go through these. We've got aggression. Aggression can be very, very frustrating, because it may be physical aggression, it may be emotional aggression and abuse, but sometimes there, you know, may be no reason around it. All of a sudden, you've come into a situation and it's completely escalated, and you have no idea what the trigger might be. So we're going to hear from Rose again, and how she and her husband dealt with her mother's aggressive behavior.
On the tough days, my husband and I would switch off. And my mom had forgotten all her English and had gone back to speaking only Greek. So she just spoke Greek, and my husband doesn't speak Greek, so it was perfect. So when she was agitated and she was cussing and yelling and saying all kinds of obnoxious things, my husband couldn't understand, so to him it didn't matter. So when she was in that mode, we'd switch off, and, you know, he'd take her for a drive. She'd stare out the window, eat fries, and she'd be fine. Then they would give me a break to really decompress from some of the stuff she was saying that I know she was just saying them, their words, but I'm a human being as well, and I was taking them personally.
And sometimes people with more emotional distance from the person that they're caregiving from can help the situation over time because, again, we know which buttons to push, especially if it's a spouse, sister, brother, aunt, uncle. We know those buttons, and we can push them quite often. So remember, again, people, want to help you, but sometimes they don't know how to, and they really don't know how to ask for help as well. So for the rest of the types of behaviors, we've got the information in your booklet that you can go back to on a regular basis, especially if you're trying to reassess how you're responding to some of these behaviors. Take some of the tips that we've talked about today with communication, and then, how do you apply these 4 strategies to different types of behaviors? So repetition. This is one that, I've talked about several different times today. It can be very frustrating for the caregiver, especially when, someone is asking the same question to the same person over and over again, or if it's in a social situation and the caregiver is overhearing this and doesn't know how to navigate that conversation. So we're going to hear from Sam to address some of the repetition issues.
Repetition is really one of the most common and also frustrating behaviors for caregivers. It's important to really just take a minute, take a breath, and really think about how you could help that person with the answer that they're looking for. It really makes no sense to sort of bump heads with them and try to correct them or try to tell them to stop asking it, because they really can't remember that they just asked you that a minute ago. So thinking about how you could provide an answer that's reassuring, even though you might be doing it over and over and over again.
And we can't hear that enough because it is so frustrating. We can't hear it enough to be reassured that we just need to be in a place that we can answer that for them. And being able to utilize those 4 techniques can be helpful. And figuring out how do you maybe even distract them into doing something different. So one of the things that we are very concerned about is wandering. We know that 60% of the people with dementia or Alzheimer's disease will wander off in some form or fashion. It may just be, down the street or in the yard, because they may be looking for something that looks familiar to them. And it can happen at any stage. Without any warning, they may have never done this before. So it is a great concern to us, and we have tools not only on our website to answer some of those questions, but we have the Medic Alert bracelets that have a safe return program with it that work with law enforcement to get people back to their safe location. And then we also have a program that's called Comfort Zone that's more of a GPS tracking type of device as well. And I know that some communities have these programs as well, and some cell phone companies are incorporating this into some of their packages. So look into all different types of options that are available to you if this is something that you need to take care of, because we know it can happen. And a lot of times, again, it happens sometimes without warning. So Beverly is going to talk about her husband Amos and some of his wandering that has happened, that she's had to deal with.
Later in this journey, and I call it a journey, he decided that he was going home to his wife. And one New Year's Eve, he looked out the window and there was a house down the street that had all the lights on, and he decided that that was his house. And it must have been, I'd say, at least 2 below zero. And he was going to leave. I had a double lock on the door, but I had left the key in. And he decided he was leaving. And I said, well, Amos, I'm your wife. No, you're not. My wife is waiting for me. And he would laugh when I said that I was his wife. So he got up and I said, Amos, I'm going to call the police if you walk out the door. And Amos, in his usual manner, said, you do what you have to do. And he walked out the door. Well, he walked out in his house shoes 2 blocks down the street. And I got in the car and drove around. It just so happened that it was a neighbor's mother, and she knew what was happening, and she talked to him, and we got him back in the car and drove him home.
So one of the most important parts that she did during that whole scenario was contact the police immediately. You want to get them involved as quickly and early as possible because they can help sometimes diffuse the agitation situation as well and help you out, and they've got your back on that. And they deal with this on a regular basis. And we do have tools for first responders, whether they're police officers, ambulance providers, or firemen, that they can learn how to deal with some of these behaviors. So wandering, again, think about what those 4 different responses are going to be. Detecting it, what's going on, what are some ways that you can connect with the person. Sometimes, like in Amos's situation, there wasn't any connecting that was going to go on, period. He didn't want to hear about it. And that may happen. But, the physical needs, she knew he had on his house slippers and it was very cold outside. So she was like, okay, well, let me watch him to see where he's walking to, and hopefully, as the police get here, I can, point them in the right direction. So she was thinking about all of those types of things. And then, his emotional needs, he was agitated. And she, stepped back and was like, okay, I'm going to do what I have to do and you do what you have to do. And sometimes you have to say that. And it's hard. It's not an easy thing. They may get so pissed off at you that you are butting heads and it's a pretty blown up tense situation. But it's for that moment. The next moment may be a little bit different. But safety is going to be the primary concern as you look at wandering. So resources. Again, we have all of these resources to help. I can't stress that enough. We've got John here that has the support group. We've got the 1-800 number. We have great community resources that can come in and help you in the home, or there's adult daycares. All of that is designed to make this a little bit easier and have a little bit of light in your day. So whatever we can do to help you through this process, I hope that you learned some tools today that you might be able to see things a little bit differently when you get into that situation the next time. But think about how we can truly help you, whether it's the 1-800 number or through some of our other resources. I appreciate your time today. This was a huge commitment from you, for sure. And we're going to hear from Sandra one more time to talk really about, how she's dealt with all of this together and kind of wrap up our day-to-day.
Everyone's situation, I'm sure, is different. My mom was a shaker and a mover. She would do whatever needed to be done. She loved to cook. She can't cook anymore. She loved to keep her house clean. She can't do that anymore. And it's tough. I don't have all the answers. When she's sitting there and my dad's cooking, I don't always know what to do. I have to learn to be comfortable with that. And if I may say, that's a big part of this, learning to be really comfortable with your own limitations, learning to be comfortable with the fact that you don't know the answer, learning to be comfortable with you're in a situation and you think you need to give her something, but you don't know what it is. You're taking her around the flowers and she's not responding. You're taking her for a walk and she's really not there with you. I don't always know what to do, but I try.
And that's what we can do, is we can try and support one another as each of us try to make this a little bit better. So again, thank you so much, and I'll be around for questions. John will be around as well. So please make sure that you fill out the surveys and put those on the back table as you leave. And again, thank you.